Apparently, I'd won a competition. It was one I don't actually remember entering. It was by using my credit card for something, which was on some long forgotten item. And the prize that was sent to me in the post was a free ticket on a Qantas mystery flight. They said in this letter with the ticket that they had no idea where I would end up, but just in case, it would be a good idea to bring my passport and overnight things. I was quite excited about this, so I packed all my stuff and my suntan lotion and my cozy, and off I went. And I said to Joni, "Oh, I'll see you one day." And off I went. And so, of course, I arrived at Tullamarine, expecting to be flown to some exotic, far-flung place. And when I got to Tullamarine, I was a bit let down because there was no passport control. We just went straight through onto the plane. Anyway, I shrugged my shoulders. I thought, oh, well, maybe the Gold Coast or somewhere over on the beach in Western Australia will be all right for a day or two. And I boarded the flight along with a bunch of excited fellow competition winners. We set off. We were offered coffee, and we flew around a bit, and eventually we landed at Melbourne. That was it. Some mystery flight, some competition prize, some surprise journey. When we're talking about a journey, it suggests movement. It suggests change, discovery, learning, going places. That's a journey. Not just flying around a bit and landing again. The early Christians, way back, weren't called Christians at all. They were known for the first 100 years as people of the way. And they were called this because they were committed to a new and different way of life. And they were working this out as they went along. They didn't have 2,000 years of church tradition. They had a few stories which had been handed down to them. They may have had access to some of the words of Paul that had been included in some of his letters. If they were really lucky, they may have had someone who could read them extracts from one of the early Gospels, such as Thomas or Mark. They may have had a few generation removed words, stories that were claimed to have come from the original disciples. And it was a compilation of some of these that they in turn would pass on to fellow travelers, also travelers on the way. So a couple of thousand years later, we're in a much more privileged position. We have centuries of learning, of scientific knowledge, of theological understanding and dozens of great minds of the past and of the present to learn from. We can also benefit from all the mistakes that have been made along the way. International mistakes as well as our own individual ones. And we have all this to lead a modern day church. Not a church of the Middle Ages, not even a church of the 20th century, but one for now. That's so important. A church for now. You see, old ways won't open new doors. And sadly, the institution of the church is often calling people to reinvigorate religion, not life. And the challenge for St. Michael's as we look to the future, and that is what we are doing today when we appoint new leaders in the life of the church, is to open new doors. It's a new journey, bit of a mystery trip, and it starts now. You see, we now are the people of the way. And just as the early church had their leadership, so we have too. And we welcome them today. It's scary, but it's exciting. And to them, and to all of us, we remind ourselves of a number of key elements of our faith and our future. You see, as we lead the way, there are a few essentials, absolutely vital essentials. The first is this: we must insist that we cannot expect complete answers. The old way has it all prescribed for us: creeds and church practices, rules and regulations, the way we worship, the way we pray. This is what you must believe to qualify. Otherwise, you're on the outer. No heaven for you. The kingdom of God is not for you if you don't follow this set pattern which we lay out for you. We'll keep it to ourselves and we'll feel very faithful and holy in the process. You see, we've got there, thank you very much, and we can tell you how to do it, and if you don't, well, you won't get there either. No. No, no, no. You see, nobody's got there. This is a journey. We are a people of the way. If you like, we're on that mystery flight. We cannot expect complete and easy answers. The new patterns and disciplines of the new faith continue to emerge constantly. It keeps evolving and moving and presenting itself to us. Without the old internal or external securities. Those of the way must learn to live in a radical discipleship, and yet, at the same time, with a high degree of uncertainty about the understanding of God and of God's Spirit. It was Paul Tillich who coined the term, instead of the word faith, he said, replace it with the word risk. And I like that. We must insist that we cannot expect easy, complete answers. The second point is this. As people of the way, we must be prepared to lose and to refuse every kind of superiority over other creeds and philosophers. I know that on a cumulative basis, Christianity is the largest faith in the world. But this so-called majority and every other thought of advantage must go. Sometimes we hear politicians describing Australia as a Christian country, often using that term as though it must be defended against all others. We must destroy that concept. We are a multi-faith, multicolored, multicultural country. And within that, we serve and we minister. George MacLeod, a former moderator of the Church of Scotland and founder of the Iona community, strikingly puts it. He says, God is not directly discerned, but mediated through people. It is through all people and all races and all religions and all philosophers that we can see and find God. Remember, Jesus wasn't a Christian. He was a rabbinic Jew. So let's not automatically assume that our way is the only way, or even think it's the best way. Our journey is our journey. And what works for me is right for me. Talking recently, only a few days ago, to a faithful and devout Buddhist, I was convinced very quickly that that way was right for that person. And even if we share the journey, that is, we get on the same, let's say, Christian bus. When you think about that bus, even in the church, we get on at different stops with different intentions. We're going to different places. We get on with different experiences, all before we step on that bus. There's a lovely, lovely lady who I've got to know in the last few months, a member of our church. She hasn't been to church for quite a long time because of sickness. But she still tunes in every week to our services and counts herself very much as part of our congregation. She has, if you like, been on that bus a very long time. But she could still, as she did, share with me the excitement of that mystery trip, the joy of being part of that journey, of being a person of the way. The third thing that we must do when we consider our future as an essential part of it is that we must develop a new communal discipline. The symbolic and dramatic presentation of Christ in deeds must not be a solitary act, any more than response to it can be a solitary act. One of the greats of world Methodism of the 50s and 60s, Lord Donald Soper, said this: the only kind of real enthusiasm for morality is the one which is geared to a community objective and is not at all set within a personal, closed, inner framework. And that's why. That's why it's right for us to make stands on issues such as dying with dignity, Aboriginal rights, marriage equality, greenhouse gases, the decline of the barrier reef, the reform of the penal system, safe injecting rooms, the rights of women, world development and animal rights. The list goes on and on. There's many more where our voice must be heard on the street, on the building, in social media, on television, on radio, and in public forums and debates. The Christian or a person of the way lives a life of faith which is defined by Dietrich Bonhoeffer as, and I quote, participation in the being of Jesus as one whose only concern is for others. Unlike the religious act, which is always something partial, the faith act is always something whole, an act involving one's whole life for others. And that's why we must carefully consider what this means for this church. Our leaders and our congregation must seriously and conscientiously, communally determine how we can work this, not haphazardly. Not saying, oh, we'll rush out to feed the homeless, or we'll grab people off the streets and we'll pull them in, but in a planned and communal way. That's really important, and that's why we elect church councillors, that's why we have a church council, to be able to consider all those things in a serious way and plan how we respond to them communally. I was on I don't know why, I think I went to see my brother who at the time was living on the Gold Coast, and I wanted to go up to Brisbane. So I caught a bus from somewhere on the Gold Coast to Brisbane. I thought I was just catching like an ordinary service bus. It looked like an ordinary service bus. Anyway, off we went. Then after about a quarter of an hour, the driver stopped and he looked at everybody on the bus and he said, this is what we're going to do. He said, every 10 minutes, I'm going to blast my horn, and at that point, the person on the outside seat move forward one and talk to the person on the inside seat. Every 10 minutes, we had to get up and talk to some complete stranger. It was the worst journey of my life. I just wanted to sit down and read my book, you know. What that was, you see, was it wasn't community, it was forced friendship, and it doesn't work. But I'll tell you what does work. Sharing a meal together. And it's no coincidence that what follows this address later on in the service, as we acknowledge the appointment of new leaders, is a meal. We call it Holy Communion. But what it is a simple act of sharing food together, honoring each other as equals in that process. When the people of the way back 2,000 years ago, first met and spent time together, how did they do it? There were no churches, there were no church halls. They'd been thrown out of the synagogues. You remember Professor Hal Toysig, who came here 2 or 3 months ago, and one of his theses is called "In the Beginning Was the Meal." And what he demonstrates very clearly in that document is that the primary way first Christians spent time together was around meals. And there they made decisions together about their inner workings, their relationship to the broader world. Meals were the place where they taught and they learned together, and where they worshipped and they prayed and they sang their songs together. This was the time when they had arguments and sorted out differences, where they went their own ways and reconciled with one another. It was a central community event. These meals provided the primary experiential evidence for those who opposed them, those who dropped in for visits, and those who were just curious. And we continue that now. And so, to our new leaders, I charge you, firstly, that there are never any complete answers. We are all constantly learning and growing. Secondly, we have no superiority over those on different faith journeys. Thirdly, we share a communal discipline in responding to the world around us. And fourthly, we must consistently embrace each other in meals of fellowship, which includes the one today. But above all, in your leadership, know that you are not commissioned here today to serve the church. You are not commissioned to serve St. Michael's. You are charged to serve the world. Listen to these words of Desmond Tutu. Despite all the ghastliness in the world, human beings, and he says this from an environment which was fraught with pain and suffering and death. Human beings, he says, are made for goodness. The ones that are held in high regard as leaders are not militarily powerful, nor even economically prosperous. They have a commitment to try and make the world a better place. Each of us, he says, I love this phrase, each of us is a God carrier. That is your intrinsic worth, all of you.